Sutta Paribrajacharya Sutarasata Shri Shrimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sakho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kundi Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We're continuing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 1. Srila Prabhupada has just gotten the funds to print his first volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. After 4 months, when the whole book had been printed and the sheets were stacked on the floor of the press, Mr. Hicharan Sharma arranged for the work to be moved to a bindery. The binding was done by an ancient operation, mostly by hand, and it took another month. Bhaktivedanta Swami would come and observe the workers. A row of men sat in a small room, surrounded by stacks of printed paper. The first man would take one of the large printed sheets, rapidly fold it twice, and pass it to the next man, who performed the next operation. The pages would be folded, stitched, and collated, then put into a vise and hammered together before being trimmed on 3 sides with a handsaw and glued. Bit by bit, the book would be prepared for final hard cover. So Srila Prabhupada, he was a sannyasi. He had taken sannyas in 1959. But here he was in Delhi, going to the paper market, going to the printer, going to the bindery, overseeing all the workers, traveling all around India and Delhi in particular to collect funds. So Srila Prabhupada, he felt that perhaps people were wondering, why is a sannyasi behaving like a materialist, just running after money and doing such business activities like printing books? So after printing this first volume, Srila Prabhupada, because we are now in the Srimad Bhagavatam classes discussing Uddhava and his realizations when he came to Vrindavan and saw the pure love of the residents here. So Srila Prabhupada, having realized that perhaps people are misunderstanding my activities, in the second volume, in his preface, he quotes Uddhava from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Uddhava says, "Great sages laboring hard under stringent regulative principles for salvation by suspending semina onwards and thus remaining naked, as well as successful mendicants who have attained complete satisfaction by purificatory practices, do achieve the transcendental sky of the name Brahman. But so far as we are concerned, oh, the great mystic," Uddhava is speaking to Krishna, "we shall transcend this world of abject nescience simply by vibrating the message of your activities as duty-bound devotees of your lordship, although we are moving seemingly on the path of fruitive actions." So Prabhupada goes on to explain that Uddhava has understood correctly. Even in the example of Arjun and Hanuman, who had to become belligerent warriors on behalf of the Supreme Lord, Srila Prabhupada, even in the garb of a sannyasi, was doing this work to broadcast the transcendental message of the Supreme Lord. And why was he taking all this effort? Prabhupada explains in his preface that he was doing so because we come in the disciplic succession of Prahlad Maharaj. And Prahlad Maharaj explained to Nrsingadev, when Nrsingadev asked him to request any benediction he wanted, he said, I'm not a businessman, I don't want anything from you. But I see that the Salvationists, they're wandering alone in the forests, they're only considering their own advancement and purification. But what I see are all the suffering living entities who are bound up in the stringent laws of birth and death. And the only thing I want is to be able to help these poor, unfortunate souls who are suffering here in the material world. So Prabhupada goes on to explain, this is the real reason why I am taking all this effort, wandering throughout Delhi, in the paper markets, in the binderies, at the printers, struggling to collect funds, simply to print these books for the benefit of mankind. So with this determination, Prabhupada, he was struggling. He didn't have any money even to maintain himself. But whatever he was able to collect, he put towards this printing work. So, being very much inspired by Srila Prabhupada's activities in Delhi, we here who live in Vrindavan, when Prabhupada established the Delhi temple and the Vrindavan temple, they were sister temples. Delhi temple was collecting to build our Vrindavan temple, making life members, getting donations, and it was being overseen. Our temple president in Delhi, Tejas, he was signing the checks on behalf of Prabhupada for the construction. So much was going on between the two. And after this Lilamrita was printed, we were able to understand all the time that Prabhupada spent in Delhi. So after Srila Prabhupada disappeared, and having served for many, many years here in Vrindavan, I realized I should follow in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada. And he was coming and going from Delhi all the time. So for 7 years, I tried to do 3 things that Srila Prabhupada was doing in Delhi. That was, first of all, distributing his books to the institutions, to the schools, to the libraries. Second of all, printing his books. And third of all, he was doing something that is not given much attention in these pages. He was going to the biggest jail in Asia, that's Tihar jail. And he was preaching to the criminals there, the youth. This was a challenge made by Dr. Radhakrishna that if your process actually works, why don't you go to the jail and preach and see if you can turn these offenders into devotees? Prabhupada took that challenge. And he was going, he had regular programs. And in fact, in his League of Devotees prospectus, we have 7 principles of the mission of Krishna consciousness in ISKCON. League of Devotees had about 29, and one of them was to preach to all of the humans this message of Godhead, including the criminals, and to take help from the police and the government to accomplish this. So, in order to do this, following Prabhupada's footsteps, I had to learn how to print. And printing is a great art. It's a whole, there are hundreds and hundreds of printers and publishing houses and newspapers in every city, Prabhupada says. He said that one non-believer once asked him, how can you possibly print 400 pages on the glories of the Lord? What to speak of one book, you plan to print 60 books. He couldn't believe that Prabhupada had enough to say. And then Prabhupada explained that in this whole creation, there are billions of universes. In each universe, there are billions of planets. And this one little earth is just like a tiny particle. And on this earth, are thousands of cities, and in each city are hundreds of newspapers and books, the printing shops. And what to speak, they have only the mundane news of this one little planet. But if we print the glories of the Supreme Lord, we can print millions of books. And this Srimad Bhagavatam is only 18,000 slokas, and because we have very stagnant brains on the earth planet, we can't absorb much. Even when we read, it doesn't stay in our brains. But on the heavenly planets, they have millions of slokas and thousands of books that they study because their brain substance is much higher than ours. So here was Prabhupada going to the binderies, doing all this printing work, and he explained to Satsvarup Maharaj that actually, before this, I never really was writing. He wrote some articles and some poetry. But he simply remembered what his spiritual master said, and this is what Srila Prabhupada wrote. So, with this, the most frightening thing I ever did to follow in Prabhupada's footsteps was to go to Tihar jail. You can imagine. You go in, there are like 16 different prisons, and to preach to these prisoners, it's a very, you think that it's going to be horrifying, but what Srila Prabhupada realized is that these prisoners, we are also prisoners, and they are prisoners, and the message is the same, both for us and for them. And he was able to make these prisoners into appreciating the message of Godhead. So he would invite the other bureaucrats to come and hear his lectures. So that was one thing, to go to the jails and preach. The next, of course, we have Prabhupada's books all printed, to go from school to school, college to college. That we were able to do. We knew how to do that. But the printing, to go to a printer and to learn all these details of printing that Prabhupada had to learn, this was a great art. So we have here in a slideshow, Abhi dikha sakte. This is the last page of Prabhupada's first volume here. You'll see this book printed in 1962 of December. Prabhupada took the trouble to put gold leafing on the cover. And to this day, the gold leafing was so finely done that it's still shining. Gold leafing, it takes extra cost to put gold leafing, but Prabhupada was willing to do that, just as if you're decorating a deity. So on this last page, Prabhupada knew he had gotten some assistance from Hanuman Prasad Podar, the Dalmia Jain Trust, but he writes an appeal. As I've already informed that this great literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, is elaborately rendered into English in 60 parts of 350 to 400 pages each. This was 364 pages, part 1. I am getting the next part ready by collecting funds out of the sales proceeds of the first part, because once Prabhupada got that initial donation and the books were printed, from the sales of his books, he then didn't have a financial difficulty. He was able to balance. Please therefore book your order immediately for the second part by remitting ₹16 only at the following address. By advance payment of price, you get the copy delivered free. Otherwise, postal charges extra. Thanking you, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So we come to the last page, and this is Prabhupada's request, that please, I'm getting the next volume ready. You please order your book, and I'll send it to you for free. So then we have, I'm giving you a little inside view, because you can see here, the first is after the printing. The printing is very big sheets. It's the size of 8 pages. That's because they fold it once, and then they fold it twice. So that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages in one section. That section is called a signature. So the first thing to do is to fold the pages and keep them all together. And you'll notice here, there's a black mark on the binding because each signature has a black mark showing where the pages will go in the book. So we have here, I was praying to Krishna, how can I show you all how this is done? Because we can't take apart these books. These are deities. So I was in the bookshop just 2 days ago, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, a book falls off of the shelf and cracks into 2 pieces, the cover and the book. And I said, all right, I'll take it home and I'll fix it. And then I realized this is exactly what I need. Because now you can all see, actually, the effort it takes to make one book. So you'll see here, I don't know if you can see so well, but each signature has a little mark on it, and it goes diagonally down, so that when they collate, because after they fold, and all of the folded pages are put in a big pile, here he is now, the printers, there's very little manual work going on. All they do is push buttons, and they oversee the machines. But here, this gentleman, he has one signature, all with the same tab on it. And he's going to give it to the collator. Here we have a collator. Now the collating still has to be done by hand. So you have here stacks and stacks and stacks of each individual signature. And the collator, he takes the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and he has to check. Someone has to check that everything is in order. Otherwise, you get the pages out of order when you bind. And then after that, now they have machines that stitch. But previously, all of this stitching was done by hand. And then after the stitching, there are pages on both sides that are part of the cover, and the book itself gets glued into this cover. So you have a little understanding. So many details. And actually hundreds of people take part in the production of just one book. So Prabhupada was overseeing. Even though we saw last week that the errata, because the compositors who were picking up those little one-by-one alphabetical fonts, they didn't know English. They were trying to follow exactly what they saw, but they couldn't understand what they were actually composing. So Prabhupada apologizes for that. And he also quotes from the Srimad Bhagavatam that even if there are defects, still the message is there. And he gives an example that if there's a fire in the house and the neighbors don't know your language, somehow or other you get the message across that please come and help. So therefore, this Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada was busy for months and months just seeing to the printing work to get this first volume done. In addition to his visits to OK Press and the bindery, Bhaktivedanta Swami would also occasionally travel by bus across the Jamuna River to Mr. Heet Sharan Sharma's Radha Press. The Radha Press was printing 1,000 dust jackets for the volume. Now previously, Prabhupada's books, when we received them, they all had the dust jacket on it. So here's another collating. One man does it all. He collates each book. Or there might be many men. For instance, if Prabhupada had 1,000 books, there might be several collators. This is the cutting and the binding part. Now there are machines. Before they did it, they would hammer on the binding. They would hammer the binding to keep the pages in place. And then with a saw, they would cut. Now they have very high-tech cutters. This is the first page of the second canto. This is the last page of the second volume. And here we have the jacket cover. Now, Srila Prabhupada, he even used the jacket cover to preach. He had we'll read about it, he had a Bengali artist paint this. And on the side, he wrote, India's sublime contribution of culture, philosophy, politics, sociology, religion, and love. Read Srimad Bhagavatam in elaborate English version, the need of the present-day world. So, most of you might not have seen this cover, the original cover, except in Prabhupada's house. So what I've done is, Prabhupada took the inside of the cover, and he used that also for printing. First, he gave a description of why it's so important to read Srimad Bhagavatam. Then he gave a detailed explanation of the picture on the outside. And then he gave two very prominent appreciations of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because by this time he was getting orders. So the first is a true copy of the order made by the American Embassy for 18 volumes plus standing orders, saying that any volume you printed in the future, you send that to us as well. Because the American Embassy sent this to the Congress Library in America, which distributed the books to the principal libraries in America. Then he gave an excellent, the best recommendation given by the Al-Yar Library Bulletin. We described a few weeks ago this Al-Yar Library Bulletin, because when a library has to order new books, they have a choice of 1,000 books. They can't order 1,000 books. So this library bulletin gives a synopsis of each of the books, recommending, highly recommending some and not so highly recommending others. And this recommendation was so high that even the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Culture, they took 50 sets for the major universities and libraries in India. So it's very, very nicely printed within this inside cover. So now, this is the way Prabhupada described this outside cover. In the center, just as we have the ISKCON painters now have redone it on the Srimad Bhagavatam covers, the original spiritual planet, resembling a huge whirl of lotus flower, is called Goloka Vrindavan, the abode of Lord Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. So we have Radha and Krishna, and then we have to the side Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna meeting with the gopis, and then on the other side we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela, because within Goloka Vrindavan there's Svetadweep, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is carrying on his simultaneous pastimes in Navadweep as are going on in Goloka Vrindavan itself. Then we have the Brahmajyoti. This original planet is throwing a spiritual ray of effulgence called by the name Brahmajyoti, or the ultimate goal of the impersonalist. Within the unlimited Brahmajyoti, there are unlimited number of spiritual planets, as there are innumerable material planets within the sun rays of the material universes. These spiritual planets are dominated by plenary expansions of Lord Krishna, and the inhabitants are there ever-liberated living beings. They are all four-handed. The Lord is known there as Narayan, and the planets are known there as Vaikunthas. So on each of these, Prabhupada is given, underneath each of the forms of the Narayan Murtis, depending upon where their insignia are, their club, their lotus, their conch, and their gada, no, the chakra. So each form of Vishnu holds these 4 insignias in different hands. And depending upon where the insignias are, they have particular names. And they have their devotees living on the Vaikuntha planet with them. So you can imagine on each Vaikuntha planet, so many wonderful activities and festivals and exchanges are going on between Vishnu and his devotees and Lakshmi Ji. So there are unlimited leelas and unlimited descriptions that can be given in all of the Shastras. We have a glimpse of that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, though Srimad Bhagavatam being the cream and the topmost of all of the Puranas, eventually leads to the pastimes of Goloka Vrindavan, which are not always available in the other Puranas. Then we have a full description, I won't read it all, of what's going on in the one small corner of the creation where the Mahatattva is. How first Mahavishnu, he expands as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, who expands then as Kiradakshaya Vishnu, and enters into every atom of the universe and into the heart of every living entity. So even without reading the book, just by glancing at the cover and out of curiosity, reading the inside of the cover, you can get a full education. And this is the expertise, the genius of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, that's all. Hitsaran Sharma now describes Prabhupada's activities. Oh, Prabhupada said a beautiful thing to Hitsaran Sharma. He said that the printing press is Radharani. And the press is producing the glories of Krishna, just as Radharani speaks the glories of Krishna. And the humble devotee who is producing all of these glories is Hitsaran Sharma. And I am merely the eternal servant of the Lord, assisting. So Prabhupada, he knew how to encourage even the printer as becoming a great devotee who was broadcasting the message and the glories of Sri Krishna, just as Radharani does. So this is Hitsaran Sharma. Swamiji was going hither and thither. He was getting whatever collections he could and depositing them. And he was always mixing with many persons, going hither and thither. With me, he was very fond that I should do everything as soon as possible. He had a great haste. He used to say, time is going, quick, do it. He would be annoyed with me also, and he would have me do his work first. But I was in the service of Dalmia, and I would tell him, your work has to be secondary for me. But he would say, now you have wasted my 2 days. What is this, Sharmaji? I am coming here. I told you in the morning to do this, and you have not done it even now. But I would reply, I have got no time during the day. Then he would say, then you have wasted my complete day. So he was very much pressing me. This was his temperament. So eventually, because Hitsaran Sharma, what we heard last week, first of all, because Hitsaran Sharma only had 10-point times Roman. And second of all, because Hitsaran Sharma, Prabhupada was not a cash customer. He had some money, but he didn't have enough for everything. So Hitsaran Sharma, being the secretary of the Dalmia Jain Trust, he had to do their work first, and then after their work was finished, he would do Prabhupada's work. But Prabhupada had a great urgency. He had to get these books printed because he was on a mission. So eventually, Prabhupada convinced Hitsaran Sharma to transfer all of the work to OK Printers, and it was OK Printers, which was on the same side of the Jamuna where Prabhupada lived in Old Delhi. Hitsaran Sharma was in Gandhi Market, which is on the other side, nowadays where Noida is, Prabhupada would have to walk across the Jamuna Bridge to get to see him each day. So when Hicharan Sharma agreed that the work could go to OK Printers, then he would delay the payment. So Prabhupada was completely frustrated with Radha Press and Hicharan Sharma. For the second volume, he did not involve Hicharan Sharma at all in the printing for these reasons. The binding was reddish. We can see this binding. It's the color of a brick. The color of an earthen brick, and was inlaid with gold lettering. Bhaktivedanta Swami had designed the dust jacket himself, and he had commissioned a young Bengali artist named Salit to execute it. It was a wraparound picture of the entire spiritual and material manifestations. Dominating the front cover was a pink lotus, and within its whirl were Radha and Krishna and their pastimes in Vrindavan, along with Lord Chaitanya chanting and dancing with his associates. From Krishna's lotus planet emanated yellow rays of light, and in that effulgence were many spiritual planets, appearing like so many suns. Sitting within each planet was a different four-armed form of Narayan, each with his name lettered beneath the planet, Trivikram, Keshav, Purushottam, and so on. Within an oval at the bottom of the front cover, Mahavishnu was exhaling the material universes. On the inside cover was Bhaktivedanta Swami's explanation of the color illustration. When the printing and binding were completed, there were 1,100 copies. Bhaktivedanta Swami would receive 100 copies, and the printer would keep the balance. From the sale of the 100 copies, Bhaktivedanta Swami would continue to pay off his debt to the printer and binder. Then he would receive another supply of books. This would continue until he had finished paying his debt. His plan was to then publish a second volume from the profits of the first, and a third volume from the profits of the second. So Srila Prabhupada, because in Delhi he was constantly busy going from Chippiwada to Churiwalan to Chowdi Bazaar to the binder, over to Radha Press. This was in the first volume because he had to still involve Radha Press. They were printing the jacket cover. But to do his writing, he had to sit in total peace and quiet in Vrindavan. So after the first printing of the first volume, he returned to Vrindavan, and he sat very quietly in extreme austerity and wrote the second volume, typing, writing, whatever he could do. And then he brought that. Kantiveda went to pick up the first 100 copies. He hired a man who put the books in large baskets, placed them on his hand truck, and then hauled them through the streets to the Chippiwada temple, where Bhaktivedanta Swami stacked them in his room on a bench. Bhaktivedanta Swami went out alone to sell his books and present them to important people. Dr. Radhakrishnan, who gave him a personal audience, agreed to read the book and write his opinion. Hanuman Prasad Podar was the first to write a favorable review. Now, when Prabhupada went in 1961-62 to see Hanuman Prasad Podar, it was 62, August, Prabhupada's intention was either to get a donation or to have Gita Press itself print it. That would have been very practical and very logical because they had their printing press. They were already distributing millions of books all over India. But Hanuman Prasad Podar, he explained that actually their English printing was not up to par. And that was why he suggested that Prabhupada do the printing outside. And that was why he arranged for that first 4,000 rupee donation through the Dalmia Jain Trust, which he was the trustee of. So Prabhupada was anyway, anyhow, trying to get these books printed. So this is what Hanuman Prasad Podar wrote, because he was the best supporter and the best appreciator of Prabhupada, because they were doing the same thing. Actually, Suryakant Fogla, who we heard about last week, the grandson of Hanuman Prasad Podar, when Prabhupada was here in 1977, just about to leave his body a few days before, Suryakant came to see him. And the devotees wouldn't let him in. He was coming with a big basket of mangoes from Mr. Dalmia, from the trust, from Jai Narayan Dalmia, one of the main of the Dalmia brothers. And when Prabhupada received the mangoes, he asked, "Who has brought these mangoes?" And they gave his name, Suryakant Fogla. And he said, no, bring him in. And Suryakant Fogla, Prabhupada saw him just like his own grandson. And he begged Prabhupada, "Please let me put my head at your feet." And Prabhupada allowed him, even in that condition, he was on his bed, couldn't move. He allowed Suryakant to put his head at Prabhupada's feet. And Prabhupada explained that he is just like a grandson to me. And Suryakant, he told the devotees that Srila Prabhupada, he has done 100 times more than my own grandfather has done. Because my grandfather was not willing to go out of India. And it was only Srila Prabhupada who was able to take this message of Sanatan Dharma and spread it throughout the world, as per the prediction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So here was Hanuman Prasad's appreciation. "It is a source of great pleasure for me that a long-cherished dream has materialized and is going to be materialized with this and the would-be publications. I thank the Lord that due to His grace, this publication could see the light." Bhaktivedanta Swami went to the major libraries, universities, and schools in Delhi, where the librarians found him calm and quiet, noble, polite, scholarly, with a specific glow in him. So, not only was Prabhupada traveling around Delhi, he had actually a very close relationship with the governor of UP, Vishwanath Das, who was in Lucknow. And Vishwanath Das, he would take advice from Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada would visit him in Lucknow, and Prabhupada, he explains this. Prabhupada, in his humility, he doesn't even describe this in other places. But one time he visited Mexico. It was his second trip. And the devotees arranged that when Prabhupada came out of the airport, they had a complete police procession for him with motorcycles on each side of his car, taking him from the airport to the temple. It was the way, the president of the country would be received. So when Prabhupada reached the temple, he thanked the devotees, and he explained to them that I had been in a procession like this with the motorcycles and the police once before, when the governor of UP took me with him to a special program. Now this program, they were going to make in Naimisharanya a Purana temple, because Naimisharanya is where all the sages heard many of the Puranas from Sutta Goswami. And they wanted to build a big temple at Naimisharanya. And there was a Swami named Nardananda Swami who had invited the governor. And Prabhupada was visiting the governor at that time, so the governor had him sit in his car with him. And they went on this accolade, this procession with Prabhupada went with the governor in that way. So that is why in 1964, when Prabhupada had, just before he left, Prabhupada had his Janmashtami celebration here at the Radha Damodar temple. When Prabhupada invited the governor to be the chief guest, he gladly accepted. And we'll see when we get to 1964, we'll see all those pictures and we'll see the nice things, the exchange between Prabhupada and the governor at that time. And there was another thing that so far I haven't read, maybe later it'll be described. Prabhupada was writing at that time, in this same year, 1962, he was writing the Gita Gan. The Gita Gan is a poetic rendition of the entire Bhagavad Gita in Bengali. And this Gita Gan is so beautiful that all over Bengal they sing it. It's distributed by the millions and millions, and the children sing it. It's because it's in vernacular language, the Bhagavad Gita. It's not in Sanskrit, it's the language that they speak. And there was one young boy who was helping Prabhupada in Radha Damodar temple. His name was Gopal Ghosh. And Gopal Ghosh came into Prabhupada's room one day, and he saw Prabhupada writing, and Prabhupada had an American pen. Actually, it's in Prabhupada's house. It was a Parker pen. Parker pen is, you know, it's like a hi-fi pen that people would use. So this Parker pen, because Gopal Ghosh was Bengali, he said, you see, Parkar. So par, kar. So in Bengali, par refers to the material world. And kar means to go over the material world. So he said, I'm writing this Gita Gan, Parkar, with my Parkar pen. So Prabhupada wasn't just doing all of this. He was doing other things as well. He was writing another book in Bengali. He was going to see the governor. He would take trips to Bombay to get more donations. So much activity. And what was the driving force? Now, the sociologists, the philosophers, and the theologians in America later carefully analyzed this time period in Prabhupada's life. There was a great admirer of Srila Prabhupada, Professor Thomas J. Hopkins. And he wrote a magnificent article about Srila Prabhupada. Because one may ask, historically and sociologically, was it the man? Was it the time? Was it the history? What was it that made Prabhupada so successful in, for the first time, spreading the Vedic teachings all over the world? Many yogis had gone to America before. Ramakrishna had gone, so many Mayavadis had gone. Why weren't they successful? Why was only Srila Prabhupada successful? So they analyzed. And Dr. Hopkins, he came to some conclusions after studying Prabhupada's activities and interviewing his disciples and understanding the history of Vaishnavism in India. He said, yes, it was the personality of Srila Prabhupada because of his determination, because of his erudition, because of his complete dedication to his spiritual master's order. But along with that, there was a whole preparation that made Prabhupada a success. And he said that started, of course we know, 500 years ago, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made the predictions that this would happen. But then there was a lull because of the upper sampradayas after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's disappearance. And it was during the Renaissance time, Dr. Hopkins explains that in the 19th century, when in the middle class Bengalis there was a resurgence of Vaishnavism, and that was headed by Kedarnath Datta, who was Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because of his understanding and collaboration with the British at the time, and his great education, and his being a Bengali Vaishnava himself, he was able to bring up this Vaishnava philosophy to a respectable level within Bengal. And he was able to inspire his son, who we know as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to carry on this mission of preaching. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati he tried many of his disciples. He sent other disciples abroad as well. He sent Ban Maharaj, he sent Bhakti Saranga Goswami, but they were not successful. So what was it that made Prabhupada successful? It was because of his 100% dedication to his spiritual master's instructions. Prabhupada understood the heart of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. We've heard many times that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told Prabhupada, if you ever get money, print books. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was not interested in building huge temples. In his logo, just like we have an ISKCON logo, his logo had a printing press on it because he was so convinced that an educated person in the modern age might not visit a temple, but they would be willing to read a book. So his preaching was dedicated to the Brihat Mridanga. The Mridanga on one side, and the Brihat Mridanga, which is the printing press, on the other side. And Prabhupada understood this. And that's why he was pressurizing Hicharan Sharma. That's why he says, you've wasted my time. Because Prabhupada knew what he had to do for his spiritual master. And he was taking inspiration from within. When he completed his 3rd volume, he said, his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, told him from within, now it is time to go to America. There's another interesting event that doesn't come here. It comes in the Vyasa Puja offerings many, many years ago of Prabhupada's followers, after Prabhupada left the planet, actually. We have, there's a very small country called Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad it's below America, a little island. And Prabhupada was corresponding with one Hindu gentleman who lived there in Trinidad. And we heard in 1961 how Prabhupada was unsuccessful to go to Japan. So Prabhupada was also writing, trying to go to other countries. So he was writing to this man, Mr. Ricky, who later became a life member, that you can sponsor me to come to Trinidad and I'll preach in Trinidad. But it wasn't successful, again. So we can't even imagine everything that Prabhupada was trying to do to carry out his spiritual master's instructions. So the librarians and the other scholars, they found Prabhupada to be noble, polite, scholarly. But when Dr. Hopkins, when he interviewed the local Vaishnava leaders here, such as Srivats Goswami, Srivats Goswami had nothing but praise for Srila Prabhupada. He said it was his courage. Prabhupada was so courageous that he was able to do what no other person, though they attempted, were able to succeed. So Mr. Pathak, who was a great admirer of Prabhupada, you'll see him in all the pictures of the grand opening, he said, we would see Srila Prabhupada. We knew he was a scholar. We knew he was a great writer. We knew that he was proficient in English, Sanskrit, Bengali, and Hindi. We knew all these things, and he was highly respected here in Vrindavan. But none of us imagined that this was the person who would change the face of the world by bringing Krishna consciousness to every town and village of the world. So they were amazed when Prabhupada was able to accomplish all this, and then he came back a success. And his success has not stopped with the end of his life. Krishna consciousness is spreading all over the world in such magnitude. Hundreds and thousands of books in so many languages. And this is all because all things brought together. The history, the sociology, the preparation of the previous generations, and finally, the one person who was able to do it due to his dedication to his guru. Traveling on foot, he visited school administration offices throughout Delhi and placed copies in more than 40 schools in the Delhi area. The Ministry of Education, which had previously denied him assistance, placed an order for 50 copies for selected university and institutional libraries throughout India. The ministry paid him 600 rupees plus packing and postage charges. Now, if you read the letter that the ministry wrote to Prabhupada, one book cost 16 rupees, but they demanded a 25% discount on the book as well. So they were paying 12 rupees for each book. But it was a standing order. Any further volumes that Prabhupada printed, they were going to take them as well. Bhaktivedanta Swami mailed the books to the designated libraries. The U.S. Embassy purchased 18 copies to be distributed in America through the Library of Congress. The institutional sales were brisk, but then sales slowed. Just as we have here, we have our BBT Go Down. Now the BBT Go Down, they will sell books wholesale. The temples will come, they'll say, give us 1,000 of this book, 100 of this book. But in our bookshops, we'll sell one book, we'll sell 10 books. And when you're on the street, just to sell one book, you have to really work hard. And Prabhupada explained it nowadays we don't see it here, but previously when we were in Vrindavan in the old days, they had the Daiwalas. The Daiwalas would have a big container of Dai on the back of their bicycle, and they would yell out all in the streets, back streets here, Dai le lo, and we'd stop, run out, get our Dai and come back. But the Daiwala in the market, the Gopal Daiwala, he just had to sit there and everybody would come to him. So this is the problem with book distribution. If you have a nice go down with millions of books, then people come and they buy so many. If you have a shop, less. If you're on your own out on the street, even less. So Prabhupada, when he went to these ministries and the embassies, and the libraries, they were taking. And we have here still Harinam Press, Shamlal Hakim. Now, he was printing the Six Goswamis literature in Hindi. He was translating from the Bengali and printing into Hindi. And he was Prabhupada's distributor here in Vrindavan. Now, Prabhupada's books were the only books in English here. So he was doing very good sales for Prabhupada. He was actually selling hundreds of Prabhupada's books here on behalf of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada would come, get the money from him, bring it to the printer, get more books. So Shamlal Hakim was very appreciative of Prabhupada's work. And Shamlal Hakim, he said to Prabhupada, all right, you're working on Srimad Bhagavatam. I know you have 60 volumes to write. But why don't you translate some of the other books of the Six Goswamis? They're very valuable books, because that's what he was doing. And Prabhupada explained to them, to Shamlal. He said, I am going to take these books to the foreign countries, and they know nothing about Krishna consciousness. Now, if I give them many books, they might become confused. For instance, and Prabhupada gave this example, if I give them Gopal Champu, certainly they will become confused. Gopal Champu is such an elevated book, and it's the adjunct canto where Jiva Goswami, he elaborates on all of the pastimes that are in small portions in the 10th canto. So Prabhupada explained to Shamlal Hakim that I'm just going to give them the most essential book first, and that is the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. And later we will do translations, and that's exactly what Srila Prabhupada did. When he had his, the time is up. All right, when he had his first books brought to America, immediately he was ready to print the second canto. And he attempted with Hicharan Sharma. Hicharan Sharma didn't do it, so then he started to do it in America, and finally he decided to do it in Japan. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.